Stan recognized early on that existing schools of psychology couldn't explain the profound experiences and resulting transformations that he and his patients underwent. Even before moving to Esalen, Stan worked with Abe Maslow and Tony Sudich to develop transpersonal psychology, which recognized the spiritual nature of humanity and the importance of memories from our time in the womb and beyond.
We got to the point where we were very satisfied with the kind of new psychology, but we had no idea how we could possibly link that gap between this kind of system that we created and what we knew as the scientific psychology. And that's where meeting Fritjof Capra and reading his book, The Tao of Physics, was extremely important for me. Francis Vaughan invited him to Tiburon to meet transpersonal psychologists, and we really hit it off.
We planned these seminars together, which we called Journeys Beyond Space and Time. And those were an inner journey of transpersonal experiences and the outer journey of physicists delving into matter at the atomic and subatomic level.
Fritjof would take the morning and tell people, how scientists, physicists now see the world of matter.
I presented perception of reality where the solid objects of our everyday experience dissolve into energy patterns and where particles can travel backward and forward in time, where these energy patterns furthermore are intrinsically dynamic, the whole universe being some sort of a cosmic dance of energy. Stan was describing very similar experiences, and as I did, he was comparing them to the experience of mystics. Now we had three perspectives: the mystical experience, the transpersonal experience, and the experience of physicists in those subatomic experiments.
After lunch, when people came and it was time for me to talk about my research, it was pretty sober as compared to what Fritjof was describing. And I was talking about something that happens in some unusual states of consciousness, whereas Fritjof was redefining the material world that we live in.
One of the key insights from the new physics is that reality has something of a holographic structure or a fractal structure. And the simplest example of this is a mathematical structure that we call the Mandelbrot set. Now in science, this is called nested sets of self-similar structures. But I like to think that this is actually a modern scientific discovery of an ancient hermetic principle of alchemy: as above, so below, as within, so without. That basically the microcosm replicates the macrocosm. If we apply these ideas to spirituality, what I would propose is that consciousness itself has this same fractal structure, which means that there is a self-similarity at all levels of existence.
Stan was one of the very first to give this new conception of life and this new perception of reality an emotional content, an experiential content. I think this is one of his many great contributions.
So many new perspectives were introduced during those workshops and month-long intensives. Michael Harner, who Stan had met on his first trip to the United States, presented his work in core shamanic practices.
It was 1965, we met in the Esalen bathtubs, is that it?
Yes, this was an interesting meeting. Yeah. We were both stark naked when we first met.
Yeah, a good way to start, and had nothing to hide.
Richard Tarnas, together with Stan, developed archetypal astrology as a means for gaining a deeper understanding of the forces influencing individual and collective psyches.
We noticed the phenomenology of the perinatal matrices could have been passages from handbooks of astrology. So that was mind-blowing because I had no understanding of astrology when I was doing it. But then we found out something even more amazing, that actually people were having in their sessions the encounter with elements of these matrices at the time when they had these planets as some significant transits. So it became something that allowed prediction, what kind of experiences people would have. I had the chance to spend very informal time with people who were like the pioneers. You know, Fritjof Capra, Rupert Sheldrake, Karl Pribram, we had Houston Smith, Joseph Campbell. You know, university had that kind of a staff. So when I started the International Transpersonal Association, I could pick up the telephone and say, I want to do a conference in Bombay, in India. I can pay the round-trip ticket and feed you, they put you up, but I can't give any honorarium. Do you want to come? And they all said yes.
Stan Grof wrote me a long handwritten letter saying how much he liked my book. He'd had a copy shipped. And he invited me to speak at a conference he was organizing in Bombay. But I'd never been to California. I'd never heard of things like the New Age movement. I'd never heard of Stan Grof. I'd never heard of Esalen. And suddenly in this hotel was a kind of astonishing world of people who were into consciousness research, talking about the Esalen Institute. Stan was talking about his psychotropic breathing and LSD research and so on. I was amazed to find myself in an environment where I could talk about the things I was really most interested in, where people were interested in finding out more, a kind of fizz of excitement and discovery and new horizons.
People were just very hungry to find an atmosphere where they could connect with like-minded people. They were not afraid of criticism that would have any implications, you know, for their reputation or their position. So we really got the truth from people.
That there is a domain of potentiality which is non-local, and therefore it is oneness.
The universe doesn't work on little.
Stan represents what has been sorely lacking, which is the long through line, a work over decades. Because in this wild, meandering exploration of the further reaches of human nature, particularly in the 60s, but even in the long sobering up of the 70s, he's been able to provide a huge body of empirical lore.
It's fair to say, I think, that I wouldn't be doing the research that I'm doing had it not have been for reading Stan's Realms of the Human Unconscious.
Yet despite the tremendous insights shared during Stan's tenure at Esalen and his continued exploration of the healing power of non-ordinary states of consciousness, so little has changed.
And the work with holotropic states also provides a very, very interesting insight into how we should approach the situation that we have in the world, where we are in global crisis, in some sense on the verge of possible extinction, and not just our species, but taking a few species with us. You know, changing the situation is not simple. We cannot just do kind of transpersonal spiritual sanitization of creation. We simply eliminate everything that we don't like, that we think it's bad or evil.
It was hard for me to hear what Stan was saying. I'd always hoped that one could avoid darkness and pain. I didn't want to believe that light and shadow were equal parts of the whole. Perhaps ayahuasca could help me make peace with that. The problem with ayahuasca is that it can take a long time to come on. The mistake that I made was thinking I hadn't had enough. I really thought I was dying. But in my heart, I knew that it was too late. There was nothing to be done. So I purged and surrendered. It took me a while to realize that I was in another dimension, and that as long as I remained formless in it, I was fine. If I tried to feel my body, I was instantly nauseous. For 6 hours, I stayed in the quantum field. At times, it seemed I was watching reincarnation, where a soul would merge with the possibility wave and then tumble down into increasing density, flipping like a coin between victim and perpetrator. Pretty much every deep experience I've had since has been uncomfortable in ways I never could have imagined. But most often, I end up in a place of great beauty and love, as though the ugliness had to be fully experienced before I had access to the underlying joy. When I look back at my archetypal astrology, I see now that I've been through a series of deaths and rebirths. What died was my limited sense of self. Once that illusion slipped away, I could feel my true nature as energy, beyond the creative and destructive cycles of the universe, timeless and vast, within a unity that might be forgotten but never lost.